In this episode, I speak with wonderful transformational speaker, Kute Blackson. He's a best-selling author of the book You.Are.The.One and his new book, The Magic of Surrender. And that's exactly what we're talking about in this episode. We're talking about how to surrender. How do we let go when we're experiencing anxiety? What does it mean to follow the calling of your soul, even when that takes you down twists and turns that you weren't expecting, things that you're not enjoying in your life? I first heard Kute on Marissa Peer's podcast and was so inspired by his story. He talks about how surrender is a key factor in the lives of so many of the great people through history. And you'll find by the end of this conversation that sense of inspiration and what can happen on the other side of surrender, the freedom, the possibility that's available to us. I left this conversation absolutely buzzing and on such a high, and I know you will too. Okay, let's go to the show. Welcome to the show, Kute. I'm very, very happy to have you here, and I think you're just the perfect person to help all of these amazing people listening to the show to let go of a bit of control, because we love control. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'd love to start with just an open question. What do you wish that more women or more people knew?
Wow. Um, just that you're whole, you're perfect, you're complete, exactly as you are, made in the image and likeness of pure consciousness. And there's nothing that can take away or add to your perfection.
That's so beautiful. I love that we're starting there. How do you think it is that so many of us miss that message or lose that
Yeah.
of ourselves?
Um,
Go on with it.
I think deep down there is an intuition of our perfection. I think deep down there is an intuitive sense that we are perfect, which is why in so many ways I think we're reaching for that bliss, that perfection, that something. But I think we often reach through means that are limited. And so, look, I think when we're born, as human beings, when we're first born, we are, as children, we are perfect. There's a wholeness. We're in touch with that perfection. We're unconditioned, pure essence. You look into a child's eyes, a child is free. A child is alive. A child will hug and will laugh, and we don't have so many conditioned fears and responses and mechanisms. A child will jump on a table naked and doesn't care if it's fat or what people think. A child will, little baby will, when we're young, we'll sing, and we don't care if we don't sound like Celine Dion or Bruno Mars. We just will sing at the top of our lungs until we start getting told and conditioned, you don't sound good, or girls should be seen and not heard, and boys don't cry, and the conditioning process begins. And so we're born these free beings, and then we incarnate into this human experience, and we meet our parents. And our parents, they're just doing the best that they can do based on their life and their programming and their upbringing and their generational patterns. So we're born into kind of a preset pattern of conditioning. And maybe dad is crazy, maybe mom's an alcoholic, maybe there's abuse, pain, trauma, hurt, dysfunction, maybe they're great people, but our parents perhaps didn't know how to meet our emotional needs. And so two things happen. I think the first thing is we learn to shut down, disconnect, and not feel. We learn to develop all sorts of strategies and mechanisms to not feel the pain of what's going on around us. So we suppress our feelings, suppress the pain, suppress the hurt, suppress as a survival mechanism. And before you know it, our light, our perfection, our magnificence kind of gets buried underneath the mountain and layer of unprocessed, unfelt emotion and pain that we've learned to suppress, to not feel. And we erect walls around our heart to deal with our environment. And then we learn a strategy and a way of being to go into the world, and the sense of who do I need to be in order to get love and validation and approval. And so we start to often unconsciously contort ourselves into a certain shape in order to to get love. Like, oh, who does dad want me to be? Who does mom want me to be? When I'm a certain way, I get love. When I'm another way, I don't. And so we start getting conditioned, and we sort of lock into a certain shape, thinking that the conditioned version of ourselves that we end up becoming is who we really are, but it really isn't. And so I think so much of our own light, so much of our own magnificence just gets hidden underneath the pattern and layers of conditioning. And so I think that's why we begin to lose touch and forget our own essence, our own perfection. And then, life and society reinforces who we've learned to become to function and survive. And then we start believing it even more, like, no, this is who I am. We often tell people, I'm just this way. But the degree to which we're conditioned is the degree to which we're not free. And I think all of us at a certain point have been conditioned and programmed. And through the process of conditioning, we kind of forget who we really are. But I think there's a part of us that feels it inside, which is why we're here, and which is why we're reaching for the light.
Yeah, what a wonderful
Yeah.
description. I couldn't agree more. And particularly, a lot of the women that I work with tend to come to me believing that anxiety is who they are, and that's just how
Mm.
they are. And this, heightened fear state and the perfectionism and the masks that we wear. So there's a lot of removing the or undoing the conditioning and looking through
Yep.
into all of that, exploring it. Now, Kip, you've written some amazing books: The Magic of Surrender, You Are the One. And I'd love to know, what does this look like in your human journey? Where
Mm.
did you start? You were born in Ghana in West Africa.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I was born in Ghana. My father's from Ghana. My mother's Japanese. I grew up in London. Now I live in the US for over 20 years. And so I feel like I'm a citizen of the world from everywhere and nowhere. People ask me where I'm from. I have no idea. um, I relate to just human beings. So that was a real blessing. As a young boy, I kind of had this feeling, this sense of feeling. I was a very sensitive kid. So I would feel people's pain very, very deeply. And I think there was a part of me that just innately wanted to alleviate suffering for people. And I didn't know what that looked like or how that looked. Um, but I had this feeling of, I want to help. I want to, how do I stop someone suffering? And so one of the things that really impacted me. I think some people would say I grew up in a bit of a unusual environment. For me, it didn't feel unusual. It felt very ordinary. I thought everybody's life was like my life, and I think it was later in my teens that I realized might have been a bit different. And so, some of my first memories were seeing. I remember seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor, and she picks up the sand that this man walks on, the gravel, and he didn't know, and she stood up, and the crowd went into uproar, a miracle, so to speak. And so week after week, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear, and people stand up out of wheelchairs. And the same man whose sand she picked up would look at a person in a wheelchair, would look at a person with crutches and say, "Hey, why do you have these crutches? Throw them away." And he would heal them, basically. And so this man was my father. Built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa. He was a very spiritual, mystical kind of guy. Built a huge church in London, about 5,000 people every Sunday. And had hundreds of thousands of followers at his height. And so I was very blessed to grow up in a bit of an unusual environment. I think part of the blessing in thinking it was normal was I grew up with the feeling that anything was possible. Like it wasn't abnormal. And because anything was possible, there was a sense of possibility I had as a kid. And so there was an openness. And so when I was age 8, I started speaking in my father's churches. I was thrown into the audience one day and my dad said, "Speak." And that began my speaking career. When I was 14, I was ordained as a minister in my father's church. And that was a strange experience in that I knew I wanted to help people, but all of a sudden, imagine this kid on stage And my father announces my son is taking over my ministry. And so my entire life was basically being scripted out for me by society, by my father, by this person I loved. And yet, deep in my heart and my soul, I knew, talk about anxiety, right? I knew like shit, something isn't right and something isn't aligning inside of me, but I was too afraid to speak my truth. I was my, and I think like many of us, we allow fear to hijack our voice, to hijack our heart, to hijack our feeling, to hijack, our full expression. And so my fear was if I dared to speak my truth and be who I am, I'm going to be outcast. I'm going to lose my father's love. I'm going to be alone. And so for about 4 years, I said nothing. And from 14 to 18, went through a deep inner turmoil and questioning and internal conflict and rationalization and back and forth. And so it was really when I turned 18 that I was at a choice point and I looked into my future and I saw, basically, I felt my soul calling me in a completely different direction. I didn't know exactly what that would be, but I wanted to go into the personal growth field and write books because I'd become obsessed with self-help books at that age. I would sneak into my father's bookshelf and he had 1,000 self-help books in his office, spiritual books, Eastern mystics, Western mystics, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra. And so I became so obsessed with just trying to understand the purpose of life and existence and who am I and why am I and where do we come from and where are we going? And is the purpose of life just to wake up, make money, buy a house and then die? Like surely there has to be more. And so I felt this calling, and I think the calling was so strong. But I think, sometimes the calling of your soul doesn't always make sense to your logical conscious mind. And sometimes the calling of your soul isn't always convenient. And it wasn't convenient. But I really believe that when you follow your soul without compromise and trust it and follow it, you will always be guided in the right place, in the right direction, even though the route that you take may not be the one that you most expect. And so when I looked into my future, I saw that if I follow the expected path, age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, age 60, if if I start lying to myself now about who I am, I'm going to have to lie for the rest of my life. And the feeling of self-betrayal felt so deep that I felt such the pain of soul suicide. And so that's when I knew what I had to do. And that was shall we say, a pivotal moment and maybe a first moment of deep, profound surrender of just saying, okay, I know what my soul is guiding me to do. And so I listened, had the conversation with my father, which was very difficult. Once we had the conversation, it was heartbreaking. We didn't speak for about 2 years, and it was full of pain and grief. But deep down, I felt that I was on the right path. And longer story short, I ended up winning a green card in the green card lottery, which brought me to the US, 2 suitcases, $800 in my pocket, 19-year-old kid, and just followed my soul, followed the dream. And then I went and found mentors and teachers and authors that I read about when I was a kid, the Chopras and Marianne Williamsons and, Jack Canfield's of the world, and studied with some of them, learned from some of them, and then ended up traveling. And I think it was really a few years later on the travels to places like Thailand and places like Israel to be with some rabbis, and then India, that really cracked me open to a deeper sense of truth and reality and purpose for my own existence. And so it was really out of that journey that I came back to LA, Los Angeles, and decided to start working with people 20 years ago, one-on-one, before coaching was popular. And one person, I had no idea what I was doing, but one person came and another person came and people started transforming. Then I kind of created my own way of working with people. I called it uncoaching, and people's lives started transforming, and it just evolved from there.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing your story. I've just got about 10,000 questions for you.
Go for it, wherever you want to go.
I was like, oh, dog ear that, note that bit. Okay, I might have to wind us back a little bit,
Sure,
but
wherever.
One thing that I really see as an interesting point in what your story illustrates is the power of how our parents can influence us
Yeah.
in terms of the conditioning and the way that we think our lives are meant to go. But what's
Mm.
interesting about your story, Cute, is that in a way, the path your father was guiding you towards seems like it was somewhat aligned because it was still in
Mm.
the way of helping people, right? It was still that, coming from that place of service, but it wasn't the right flavor for you.
Yeah.
Does that feel correct?
Yeah, it wasn't the right flavor. It wasn't the right alignment. It wasn't the right vehicle. The expression
Mm.
was not aligned, you know.
Yeah.
And I tried to fit myself, to be honest. I tried to make myself and fit myself into the box of what he wanted and everybody wanted, but it just didn't quite fit. And so I think many times we rationalize and we try to fit ourselves to be what we think society wants us to be and how we think the world wants us to be. And then we wonder why we feel crazy and why we feel depressed or why we feel unhappy or why we feel exhausted because we're resisting our truth. We're resisting what we truly are. We're resisting our authentic soul's expression. And so I think one of the things that keeps us stuck or blocked from going to that next level or breaking through as human beings are all the ways we lie to ourselves. I think in so many ways, often unconsciously because of our conditioning, right? Survival, self-protection, fear, we're lying to ourselves. You know, we're taught from a very young age to lie to yourself about how you feel. I feel sad. No, I don't. I feel okay. And we start that process from a very young age unconsciously. We contort ourselves into being who we think we need to be, which is already another process of lying to ourselves unintentionally, good intention to get love and validation and approval, becoming who we think we need to be in order to get love, validation, approval from parents and caretakers. And so I think one of the things that keeps us stuck are all the ways we lie to ourselves. We stay in relationships that we know are not aligned. We work careers that we know are not aligned and is not a true expression of our purpose in this lifetime. And I think if we feel pain, to me, the pain is just a signal. The pain is feedback that we're not in alignment. And so I would just invite people, maybe as we have this conversation, to sit with the question, what lies am I telling myself? Just sitting with what lies am I telling myself? There is no transformation without truth. And sometimes the anxiety that we feel is sometimes can be a signal of a part of us that knows that we're not in alignment. Like something's off and we feel it and we're not listening. And so for me as a kid, I felt a bit of anxiety, which turned into then, internal conflict and frustration. But the anxiety was like, oh shit, this isn't right, but I'm going down a path that I know isn't right. And a part of me was freaking out even more. And so I think if we can just sit with, okay, what lies am I telling myself? We have to want the truth and to be free more than we want what we have. We have to want the truth and to be free more than we want what we think we want. And yet sometimes we're afraid to tell ourselves the truth because we're afraid of the consequence, which sometimes that consequence can seem to trigger some anxiety as well. Like, oh, shoot, what will happen if and the thing is, if we lie to ourselves, what we also have to realize is in not dealing with what we feel and the truth, we will be dealing with it for the rest of our lives. And so one thing I tell people that sometimes helps them is take the pressure off of yourself of having to take any action. It's sometimes the pressure of, oh, if I acknowledge the truth, I have to take action. I have to do something about it. I have to break up. I have to get a divorce. I have to leave my job. And I say, when you take the pressure off of yourself of taking any action, and you just start by acknowledging the truth, you don't have to do anything No pressure. Okay, I'm not in love anymore. Just be with that for a moment. Nothing you have to do. Don't have to get a divorce. Don't have to break up. Just acknowledging what is and getting into relationship with what is. That begins a process inside, an alchemy inside. I hate my job. Don't have to leave, but just being with that starts a process inside. And so I think that the truth is really a foundation of where people can begin. And I think something happens when you can start making peace with what you really feel. It can feel scary at first, but when you make peace with it and come into relationship with it and embrace it and accept it, what at first seems so scary to acknowledge, you start just integrating it into your being. It's like, yeah, I'm not in love. I hate the job. This is what is. And often you will find that you start calming down.
Yes, there's a
You,
relief that
yes,
comes
there's
with
a
that.
there's a relief when you're like, I finally told myself the truth.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a place where people can begin, just looking at what lies am I telling myself and just acknowledging them. There is no freedom without truth. And I think truth is real spirituality. Truth is real spiritual practice. Truth is real therapy. Truth is real yoga. And I think if we really told ourselves the truth and then did our best to live that, it would free up so much. It takes tremendous energy to resist our truth. It takes tremendous energy to live a lie.
Yeah, and it can be so insidious. Something, I mean, for your situation, it was very clearly like your dad wanted you to go down one path. For me,
Yeah.
I had that sort of more open. It was like you can do whatever you want to do. However, subtly, there was this
Mm-hmm.
feeling of I needed to do something
Mm-hmm.
impressive. And so as a young kid, for me it was I should be a lawyer. And that was the thing that was like, oh, I feel sick at this thought. But for
Mm-hmm.
other people and some of the people I work with, it's like they say to me, I've never, but my parents always said I could be whatever I wanted to be, and they were always very encouraging of everything. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I think there's an even deeper layer that you have to look at because if you think you haven't been conditioned in some way or led down a path some way, that's where we have to ask that question even more. Do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. And I think that that layer that you're talking about is part of what can also make us feel a bit crazy or anxious because, like, we're being told one thing, but the energetic reality is something different. And so it's like internally confusing, especially for us as children. And I think that, wait a second, it's not matching. That mismatch can get conditioned into our nervous system as well, where it's like I'm being told one thing, but I'm feeling another thing. It doesn't add up, and we start feeling that disconnect.
Yeah,
So,
especially when we're intelligent and high achieving and we're like, oh, I've just mastered the rules of life. Like, I've figured this game out. I know how to play it. And then, hang on, like, there's not happiness in this? Following
yeah,
this path, the corporate
yeah,
career or the
yeah.
making the money or,
That's I want to say that's the worst. But sometimes when we're in pursuit of a goal that we think is going to make us happy, is at least the we still have the illusion of the fantasy that it might make us happy. But sometimes when we actually attain it and then you still aren't happy, that can be the worst because now you got what you thought was going to make you happy and you're not. And that can, I think, lead to a deep reality check, sometimes depression and a huge letdown, for sure, for sure.
And yet we know that the pursuit of a goal and that feeling of progress makes us feel good. And it's good for
Yeah,
our I would say that's a good thing for our mental health
yeah.
and our general life path to sort of be in that sense of I'm moving forward, I'm growing. But can those goals how do you kind of reconcile that when we have these goals and we're trying to chase them and chase these dreams?
Yeah, I think, the pursuit of a goal that is truly aligned and authentic is key.
Mm.
Um, because many times our goals are sometimes projections, which you kind of touched on, projections of even unmet needs from childhood. Wasn't enough and wasn't loved, didn't get this, but if I can just become the lawyer or achieve that thing, then I'll be enough. And so even the pursuit sometimes that isn't deeply fulfilling, truly fulfilling. Now, yes, I think the pursuit and the feeling of progress, definitely there's something there for sure. But I would also say we sometimes get so attached to the outcome of the goal and our sense of value and worth and identity based on the attainment of the goal. And I think society also sets us up to the standard of success as you attained the goal or you didn't. And so in the pursuit and in the process, many times we're not happy because we're so busy in the pursuit and waiting until we achieve the goal in order to feel some happiness, because we think that the achievement of the goal is the source of our happiness. The attainment of the goal is the source of our happiness, and it's not. One thing I want to say about that is, yes, sometimes when you achieve the goal, you feel a momentary happiness. But here's the mistake or the misconception. When you achieve the goal, even if it's not an authentic goal, got the Lamborghini, became the lawyer, and I'm happy for a moment, and then I'm not. Because here's the thing. We think the attainment of that objective thing is the source of happiness. It's why we actually feel happy is because we attained it, and the process of seeking, constantly seeking, stopped. Ooh. Ego is the activity. Ego is the process of activity. So when we attained it, we got the Lamborghini for a moment, and then we're not happy. But the moment we got it, we're like, because in that moment, it's not the Lamborghini or the thing that made you happy. It's the fact that you stopped activity for a moment. In the process of stopping, cessation of constant seeking actually got you in touch with your true nature. And so what I like to say is your true nature is joy. Your true nature is happiness. It's what you are. It's not the thing that makes you that. It's the fact that in the seemingly achieving of it, you stopped searching, you stopped being active, and then what was always there got revealed.
Because
which is the true happiness.
Is it like your ego allows you to be for a moment?
For a moment, your ego just felt like stop. In the stopping, kind of the ego dissolves, and in the dissolving, you're just here present right now, which is why kids are just freaking happy. For nothing really happened. They're just happy. They're just happy. And so when we realize that happiness and joy and bliss and is really what we are, then we realize, it's not the object that is the source of my happiness, is what I am. Then I think we stop seeking happiness in objective experiences, and we shift our focus to the moment and the process. And I think when we can really savor the process, savor the experiences along the way, and shift our focus to the evolutionary journey of our soul, that our soul gets to go on, the evolution, to me, that's the success, who we become in the process of the pursuit, who we evolve into and unfold into, and the lessons we learn in the process. I think that's the real joy, and that's the real success. So that even if we don't attain the thing, if we enjoyed the journey and we became more of our authentic selves, and we learned lessons, and we learned the lessons from why we went on that journey in the first place, I think that's the real joy. And it's not dependent on whether you attained it or not.
So true. I've never thought of it that way, that it's the achieving of the goal that allows us to, like, the reason we feel happy is because there's a moment where our ego has said, okay, like, now you've done the thing that says you're enough, so you can stop for a moment.
It's the stopping.
But then we launch into more, it doesn't last for very long.
Because we launch into that because we think, I achieved that thing, and the thing made me happy. So now I need to achieve more of the thing, or more of the thing, because now we're associating the happiness with the thing. But we didn't realize it wasn't the thing, it was the stopping.
Yeah.
And so that's so then we kind of get addicted to the constant seeking and achieving of the thing, because our wires are crossed.
So, how do we allow ourselves to be more of the time and be happy more of the time? Um, and yet, like, do we have to just sit in the woods and meditate for our lives? Like, wouldn't we waste away and die?
Yeah. That's why I think if you can just realize first the miswiring, like, okay, it's not the reason okay, got it. I think if we can just get the coordinates straight, that helps, and understand that, um, and really just do our best to focus on the journey, and do our best to focus on celebrating the moments, and focusing on the lessons in the learning and the growth along the way. I think that's really the key. When we shift our focus to, okay, who am I becoming, and what am I learning on the journey, through this roadblock, in this heartbreak, in this difficulty, like, and remember that life is a we are souls, and we incarnate into this human experience in order to learn, to grow, and to evolve. And life is really a university for our soul's evolution, and every experience is really like a curriculum for our soul's growth and evolution. And so if we start to see life and perceive life, and shift our focus to start seeing life as a opportunity for our soul's growth and evolution, then I think we start seeing every moment as a opportunity to grow, every moment as an opportunity to learn. And so when our focus shifts in that context, I think it shifts so much. This way, when we go through stuff, and we go through difficulty, and we go through challenges, it becomes less about, like, why is this happening to me? And the thing didn't happen, and now my happiness is dependent on that. It becomes more about, why is my soul going through this? And what is my soul seeking to learn? And what is the lesson? And learning the lesson. And in learning the lesson, we graduate. And the joy, the happiness becomes also in the growth and the evolution and the learning. And I think that's the shift in focus that we get to make. That, because at the end of your life, we don't take anything with us. No ring, no iPhone, no laptop, no pen, no shoes, no bag, no brand names, nothing other than the evolution of our consciousness, and that is something no one can take away from us. No one can give us, no one can take away from us. And I think when we really focus there and feel that, then no matter what happens, there can be a fulfillment inside. Yeah, there can be fulfillment.
Anyone listening, I hope you rewind and listen back to that a couple times, because I think what you've just highlighted there is a brilliant way to reframe, so that our ego, our fearful part, our mind can kind of be satiated and soothed in that process of being like, this is okay, this is what's real, this is the purpose, this is what
Yes,
we
what's
really
real.
are
Yeah,
pursuing. Yeah.
yeah. And it doesn't mean you can't have stuff. It doesn't mean you sit there and do nothing, and just sit in the woods, in the forest, and just give up. No, I would say, okay, the old ego-based paradigm of living is all about make it happen, right? And get clear on what you want. But as we talked about, you might get what you thought you wanted, to realize what you thought you wanted is not what you really wanted. It was just what you thought you wanted based on who you thought you were. Because if we're not in touch with who we are, then the mechanism that sets goals is going to be our ego, which is going to be conditioned. And so then we project goals that aren't clear. And so the old paradigm is about, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And so I'm just inviting people to shift the question, not become a monk or go in the forest. Shift the question and say, okay, what is it that life is seeking to express through me? what is it that the universe is seeking to express through me? What is the deepest impulse that my soul is seeking to express? What is my soul seeking to express? What is life seeking to express? And I think when we can attune to that, feel that, and then align with that, then we can align with what is authentic, what is real, what is most real, or at least what we are most able to tune into in terms of what feels real. And then you can align your personality, your actions, your money, your resources, your marketing with what's real. Then you can go into action the best you can in the direction of what's true, not what you think you should be doing, but what's true. For example, my new book, The Magic of Surrender, it was not the book I wanted to write. It was not the book I thought I should write. My ego was like, I'm going to come up with all sorts of like sexy ideas and brilliant ideas of books I think are going to sell, books I think the public would want, books I think my audience would buy, books I think the publishers would want, books I think is going to be a New York Times bestselling title. And I wrote all sorts of like 100 clever ideas on a whiteboard. None of those felt authentic. I could have BS'd myself and pretended, but the truth is, when I was honest, none of those in my gut felt aligned and real, where I could look you in the eyes and say, this is the book. They were like marketing creations, but in my own soul, none of them felt real. And so the only word that stood out for me was the word surrender. It's like, shit, surrender. But, you know, the people want surrender. It's like, this is the only word that had a integrity and resonance and alignment with my soul. And I knew that this was the book that was seeking to be written, not the book I wanted to write. And so I think there's this idea that if I surrender to my soul, if I let go, I'm going to just live in the forest. I'm going to give up everything. And I'm saying it's a misconception of surrender. Like this idea that if you surrender, you're giving up. If you surrender, you're waving the white flag. If you surrender, you won't manifest your goals, dreams, and desires. It won't happen. You're going to lose out. You're not. And I'm saying, no, what if you truly surrendered? You didn't get less, you got more than you could have planned with your own limited ego's imagination. And so when you align with what's authentic and true, you and go into action and you commit fully, you give everything. You might work harder than you've ever worked. You might be working 22 hours a day, like Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Mandela or Martin Luther King. They didn't sit in the forest, they were working, but they were working in alignment with a cause that was bigger than themselves. And so surrender is to let go of control, or we should say the illusion that we're in control. And I think control is the master addiction, and that addiction to control also creates anxiety because we're often trying to control things that we aren't in control of. And that is a major source of anxiety. We try to control things that are in the future that haven't even happened yet, and creating negative future fantasies about things that aren't even in reality right now, another major source of suffering and anxiety. And so surrender is letting go of this illusion of control. Surrender is when we stop trying to force and manipulate life to fit our idea of how we think it should be, and give up the idea of who we think we should be and how we think life should unfold, so that we can take the limits off of life and be open and be available. And that's when I think the magic will happen. That's when I've seen the miracles will happen. And you might find yourself busier than you've ever been, but in alignment with something that's authentic and true. If you look at the great ones, Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Bob Marley, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, some of the folks I'd mentioned, they all surrendered themselves. In that surrender, they transcended their human limitations. They tapped into another dimension, and life, that's when they got themselves out of the way, and life was able to use them. Life was able to manifest through them in perhaps ways they couldn't have planned for themselves. And so I want people to get excited to say, what if you got more than you could even write down in your journal right now? I'm not saying don't write down in your journal, but just don't get so attached and we get so attached and limited. Like, no, it's got to be like this. My soulmate's got to look like this. It's got to happen like this. And the limitation is our ego gets attached to how we think it should be. And it's that attachment that creates limitation. And now we're not open to the infinite possibilities of life. And that's what I want people to understand. It's give 100%, give everything you've got, but don't get attached to like, it's got to be like this. Because sometimes life will guide you in a direction to pivot you over here, to take you over here and take you over here. And you might be surprised.
I'm so curious to ask you, and those listening to the audio, that crumply sound was cute.
Oh,
He was crumpling a piece of paper to demonstrate the point of crimping on. But I'm so curious then, what kind of concept idea, you mentioned mapping out all these ideas for this book and and the title and what would sell and how you could strategize and control it essentially to make it successful. So what kind of concept of success do you hold in your mind as you are, like working through it and talking about this book and sharing it? What is success for this book? Is there an idea of that, or is it just can we kind of hold on to nothing with it, an emptiness?
Yeah, I think it's connected to what I mentioned, which success isn't just the attainment of the outcome. Success is the degree to which I learn the lessons in any given situation, in any given relationship, in any given experience, the degree to which I evolve, and the degree to which I become my most authentic self. For me, that's the key. So let's say for the practical folks in the world, it's like, well, does that mean you don't have a goal for the book? No, I have a goal for the book to sell a gazillion copies because I want it to reach the world. And, sure, love it to be in New York Times, love it to be on this, and love it to get to there, and love it to. And so make a plan. Yes, I made a plan, made a strategy. Yes, did a gazillion podcast interviews. Yes, we're doing another one today. Absolutely. So I'm not sitting here going, I hope the book sells. I just surrendered. No, I'm going to do everything I can. But the thing is, I'm not, and I'm giving, like if I tell people I have done over 300 podcast interviews in the last 4 months.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I have not met one person yet that's done 300 podcast interviews in the last few months. And these are hour-long interviews, okay? That's a lot. So just to be clear, surrender doesn't mean I'm sitting on my couch just waiting for the book. No, but the difference is I'm not promoting a book that I thought I should be writing that has nothing to do with what's aligned. And because the book is aligned, because the project is authentic for me, I can align with it and give everything to it. And from that point, I give everything. I've done my part. Whatever happens, however it sells, whoever it reaches, I have peace in my heart when I'm done with the project. I've done my part. And that's the freedom. I think it's also easier to surrender when like a lot of people say, oh, I gave everything. I did everything to manifest my vision and goals. What's everything? I made 2 phone calls. That's not everything, right? And so I think there's a peace that comes when you know you did everything in your human capacity. It's easier to truly surrender and let go. So the challenge is many times we don't give everything. We hold back. We sometimes hold back as a self-protective mechanism unconsciously, because if I don't give everything and I hold back, if it doesn't happen, I don't feel as bad, because I can always have the safety of knowing, well, I didn't really give everything. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work as hard. It doesn't feel as painful. So that's another self-protective mechanism, to not give everything. But it's easier to surrender when you give everything.
Yeah.
Then it's easier to free yourself up. But many times we don't. The other challenge is when you give everything and now you go over as in now you get over attached, right? You get over attached to the outcome. So you don't give enough, and then you start being way overboard, even to the point where now it's you're driving yourself crazy. So all you can do is really understanding what's in your control, what's not in your control, and making sure you're giving everything and doing 100%. When you do that, like even if you look at a relationship, breakups in relationships, never easy. But I know that in a relationship, when I look back, whenever I could say, I gave everything to this person, there's literally nothing else I could have given in this relationship. It's painful. I'm going to have to grieve it. My heart is broken. But damn it, I actually gave everything. It's easier to let go. Doesn't mean it's not painful, but it's easy to let go. Sometimes what's harder to let go is knowing, like, I gave 40%, I gave 50%. I really didn't give everything. And so I think there is a peace that comes in knowing there's nothing else you could have given to a project. And so that's what I endeavor to do with any project or a book is give 100%, give 110%, and then don't try not to be attached to the results.
I love that. And you really highlighted, the dance between burning yourself out. And
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask, I
Yes,
think I
please.
know the answer to this question already, but what is it that you are feeling right now in this podcast interview talking about this subject? And you've done these 300 or so episodes or interviews. What are you feeling?
I honestly, I feel for me, it's inspiration. It's
Yeah.
alignment. It is um, inspiration, alignment, mission, truth. Uh, I feel like for me, I'm a messenger of surrender, um, aligned and alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know for me, if the book was just a marketing gimmick or a thing I think I should do in order just to do it because it's the thing to do to get a brand out there, I couldn't do 200, 300, however many. It's impossible. But because it's bigger than me, right? There's a deeper connection that the book has a soul of its own, and
Yeah.
I'm in service to that. That's for me the connection, and that's how I know. That's how you will know that what you're doing is real.
And this is, I find so fascinating because even though, yes, you're working hard and you're, putting in a lot of time and energy, the energy that's carrying you is like, it's almost like the wind at your back as you work hard, which I think people
Yeah,
miss. Like, we're just like,
yeah,
oh, it needs to be painful and I need to really slam myself and hurt.
yeah. It. I think the word is suffering.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be suffering, but there might be moments of challenge and effort and maybe some moments of pain, but the piece around it mean it doesn't have to be suffering.
Hmm.
To me, the suffering part is the optional part when the ego starts getting involved and making all sorts of interpretations. Like if you run a marathon, like I remember I ran a marathon, one marathon I did. It's a whole nother story, but I ran this marathon. And honestly, up until mile 18, I was fine. I was cruising along. Mile 21, I felt something. Okay, it's getting interesting. Mile 22, feeling, this is getting. Mile 23, I felt some pain. For sure, there was some pain. And I realized, oh, this is what people talk about, the wall. And it's time to dig deep. For me, that digging deep was surrender. And part of that surrender was saying, I'm going to go through this. It's not even an option to not. I'm going to go through this. I feel aligned. I'm going to go through it. And so there might be pain, but there doesn't have to be suffering. Suffering is really all of the narrative, the internal voices of judgment and false meanings that we add to an experience that create more suffering that's unnecessary. And I think that's the difference. And so, yes, there might be pain. You know, if we hit the Dalai Lama in the chest, boom, you know, God forbid, right? But if we did, he would feel pain. But the suffering is all of the judgments and the meanings that we add to the experience that create an unnecessary heaviness. And so there doesn't have to be that. And that is what we create ourselves. And so that's, I think, something we get to release and let go of. You know, yeah.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this discussion so much. I feel I got like one of my 10,000 questions answered, which was bound to happen. One more I'm
Sure,
kind
sure,
of
sure.
phrase and pull from the story you shared at the beginning. You mentioned some pretty amazing miracles and things that you witnessed
Yes.
as a boy growing up. And this sense of awe and magic and that space
Yeah.
for the impossible to be created is a subject that fascinates me. And I wonder to what extent we all, as children, have an openness to that. We all have these imaginations. And you mentioned particularly you saw these things, like you saw the evidence of these things. So many of
Yeah.
us are sort of making up the fairy tales and play pretend, but we can go to that place of the unlimited so much more easily. Um, I'm I don't even know what my question is actually, other than um, this openness to magic. Do you feel that's
Mm.
something that I sense is available to all of us if we can tap into that
Yeah.
childlike space?
Yeah. I don't even think we need to tap into that childlike space. I think we just need to open our eyes and look around us. Because the truth is, people often say, "Oh, wow, those miracles that you got are amazing." To be honest, the deeper I go in my own evolution, the less I really care about those miracles. Because I think anybody right now, if you just went and stood in front of the mirror and looked what was in front of the mirror, you would see a freaking miracle. We just don't acknowledge it. You know, we just don't see it. People might say, well, come on, Kute. No, no, literally, like there are trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of cells right now interacting, reorganizing, moving, cleansing, shifting, livers, colon, brain, all of these processes happening just inside of you right now for us to be able to have this conversation, for those that are listening to just be able to listen. And we take it for granted, like, oh, it's nothing. It's like just to wiggle my hand. I mean, I don't even know what has to happen for that to even happen. It's freaking, it's literally miraculous, but we just, myself included, don't pay attention. I'm looking outside in Los Angeles and I see a mountain. I see freaking blue sky. I see this sky every day. But it's a sky. Holy, I mean, I don't want to
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
but holy shit, it's like a freaking sky. Like it's incredible. There's a green tree. It's mind blowing, but we just go through life.
yeah.
I'm guilty of it. Like, it's just another day. And so I think the miraculous is what we are. The miraculous is existence that we can touch, taste, smell, see colors, experience sensations. It's just all of it's miraculous, but I think we just have become used to it and just haven't put our attention there. So I think bringing our awareness to the level of ourselves that is miraculous every moment and appreciating that and letting that in, allowing ourselves to feel what we are. Like you and I, we're breathing right now without any effort. It's just happening. Digestion is happening without any effort. You had breakfast this morning and whatever you had, a banana, a smoothie, a
I did have
sandwich.
a banana. How did you
See,
know?
I'm psychically the banana, right? How is it that your hair doesn't turn into banana? Like, there's the freaking intelligence. Like if we really sit with that, like you ate a banana and your hand doesn't turn into a banana. Yeah, there's all sorts of scientific, explanations, but still, when we really sit with the deep reality and mystery and magnificence of just this innate intelligence, it is amazing. And so I think just bringing ourselves to that conscious awareness brings us into the miraculous, let alone nature and the universe. And so I think there's so much that is miraculous. Even just somebody forgiving someone that has betrayed them is miraculous. Forgiving your parents for stuff that they've done to you, miraculous. Speaking your voice when you have been afraid for the longest time, miraculous. Forgiving yourself for things you've judged yourself for and learning to love yourself, like just for being you as you are. It's miraculous. And so I think miracles are all around us, not just in these mystical experiences with people seeing and blind people and deaf people. I mean, that's great. It's amazing. But I think every moment is a miracle, truly.
It's like those are the little sparks that slap us in the face and wake us up to all the miracles that are available and are around us. I couldn't agree with you more. I love that so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you and to create this energy. I feel like I'm on a total high now, and I know anyone listening will feel that too. Tell me, where can we find you and keep in touch and grab your books?
Awesome. Yeah, the book, The Magic of Surrender, available on paperback. Go to Amazon. You can get it there. It's a manual of surrender, so written from my heart, my soul, really. My main website, Kute Blackson, Kute Blackson.com. Twice a year, I do an event in Bali where I take people on a deep dive, 12-day immersive transformational training using Bali as the backdrop. It's some of my deepest work. boundlessblissbali.com. That's www.boundlessblissbali.com. Instagram, Kute Blackson. Facebook, Kute Love Now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It has been just sensational to speak with you.
Appreciate it.
Has this episode left you wanting more? Consider joining the Anxiety Reset program. I'll be there supporting you live each month, and weekly videos take you through simple steps that you can implement at your own pace. Over 90 days, we reprogram your mind to reduce negative thinking, release the need to be perfect, build confidence, feel okay with uncertainty, and finally let go. You'll create deep relaxation and calm by addressing your gut health, hormones, nutrition, and more all in one. You really can master your anxious mind. Let's do it together. Learn more with the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories, and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.